Hello, Lizzie. Hello, Caitlin. Thank you so much for making some time to talk about your new book, Creative First Aid.
Hey, Sai, thanks for having us.
No worries. You got a copy there. We can show the people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there it
fantastic.
is.
I kind of really want to kind of jump into this and just learn a little bit more about the genesis of the book and really just so other people are aware and encourage them, whether they're therapists or community workers or social workers or people in the community that have a sense that creativity can really help their mental well-being. I want to kick off. I was taken by something that you both said on page 13. And you said, we share the belief that self care is a radical act of non negotiable repair in a culture that prioritizes work.
Mm,
Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit
man.
more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start with that. I just think we are witnessing really on a really mass scale the impact of living in a capitalist world where tending to ourselves is so far down the list, and people are so deeply programmed to deny that for themselves, and feel a lot of shame about spending time doing that. It causes sickness, in lots of ways, and deep kind of a deep wound in our collective culture. And I just, for me, it just comes back to the reality that we live inside a human body and it needs things and we can't pretend otherwise. And it needs food and water and shelter. And it also needs emotional and psychological restoration and recharge. Like we just can't continue going and going and going and pretending or not anticipating that need and then wondering why we don't feel good about ourselves or even good in our own body. So it is a radical act to even start to think about that, because we have to reject or step outside that very powerful programming that is so deeply woven into modern life. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
even just seeing, and for a while the work we did in Rumpus, the previous iteration of Makeshift, was a lot about working with creatives, and just seeing how often that would people would find a creative practice that they really loved and then quickly move to kind of monetize it. Just the urge for it had to have a purpose beyond just being good for you or feeling good or being pleasurable and joyful. That quick, I better make money out of it or turn it into a business, which is, yeah, a curious thing too.
Yeah, and just coming back to the settings that you mentioned at the start of mental health workers and social workers and psychs that are working in the community, and we do quite a bit of work with that sector, and they're often the people that will look after themselves the last. They're out there doing stuff for community and people, and so prioritizing self-care as a radical act in that setting is quite revolutionary, because they're up against bureaucracy and capitalism and giant institutions often that aren't designed, and there's no systemic design to support psychological needs. And yeah, that's a bit about what the book is about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. One of the things that us Westerners like is a little bit of research to kind of to back things up.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you what stood out for you as a piece of kind of research science about creativity and just how powerful and helpful it is for people's mental health well-being. Yeah, which stood out for you?
For me, it was actually quite a small study in Germany. And, I find the world of academic research so fascinating, that, there's been criticisms of this study that it was too small or not big enough. But anyway, the study tested what happened to people with quite limited art making experience when they just drew anything. So stick figures, just marks on a page. And it showed mostly overall almost everyone doing that. It showed a really significant drop in cortisol, stress hormones, which to me is just such powerful evidence that we're meant to do that. Like, we're designed to do that. And it's this very immediate effect that is mirroring what often medicine is trying to do. And then on top of that, like starting to we didn't have to try very hard to find so many tiny studies that all showed things pointing in that direction. If you give people the opportunity to do something creative in a safe way where they're supported, they feel better. Their nervous system gets regulated. They are more able to connect socially. And so all of that adds up to a very powerful picture. And I saw just yesterday a new study that's come out, and a lot of money was poured into asking the question, does art help mental health? And guess what? The answer is yes. Like, how many more times do we need to test this in a research setting? Like, let's get it out there. Let's start applying this in practice.
Caitlin, you mentioned a part of the human body that's close to my heart as a psychologist that I think about a lot, which is the nervous system and a nervous system health and wellbeing. The nervous system features big in creative first aid. So yeah, I'm just keen to hear from either one of you about how the nervous system made it into your book.
I think the nervous system made it into the book alongside creativity, because as a human being, every single person has a nervous system and every single person is creative. So we've got these two tools that we can work with no matter what state we're in, no matter where we're at in the spectrum of mental health. And so a bit about the book is taking agency around our own mental well-being, and that there is a whole bunch of stuff that you can do for yourself without seeing a psychologist is often only 1 hour, possibly every fortnight or even every month, which is amazing and super supportive. But there's also a lot of hours in between that one critical hour of care. And so understanding and learning the literacy of the nervous system is a kind of gateway into how you can apply creativity as an intentional application or prescription for looking after yourself. And it does start with knowing how your nervous system functions and starting to recognize when your nervous system is edging itself, either into a state of hyperarousal and anxiety or the opposite, into a numb, frozen space, and just taking that as information to work with for yourself.
And I'm sure you probably share this frustration too, Si, that just the lack of literacy generally about the role of the nervous system in our well-being is wild. That this isn't just a basic part of curriculum at school that we learn. And instead, so many people get entangled in creating big stories about actually what's their nervous system's just like saying, hey, I need something here. I'm sending you a message for a reason. And instead we attach a big story like, oh, I'm so negative and I'll never be different and I've got anxiety and which can then entangle us further into more distress, instead of reading it as like a sign that you're hungry, this is a sign I need to take a break, or I need to do something for fun, or So we did a lot of reading on what else is out there about the nervous system. There are some great resources, but they're very technical and like lots of dense.
They're pretty dense.
Yeah, jargony. So we tried to write a chapter that was just trying to tell a story,
I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
I'm going to put my last two questions into one, actually, and that is if you could explain, what is creative first aid, and then kind of in and around that, how do we as a practitioner or ourselves through the use of your resource with the book, how do we apply creative first aid? What are some ways that we could go about it?
Well, creative first aid is a methodology that we've designed from working together for the last 10 years, and specifically the last 5 years, using creativity as a tool to work with people experiencing PTSD and symptoms that come with that, primarily first responders, police officers and paramedics. We worked quite closely with artists and used creativity as a tool for their recovery, and then designed this concept of creative first aid around that through our work. And the book is called Creative First Aid. It's, refining it is just being conscious of using creativity as a tool or a dose to support yourself. Whether that be, we think of creativity in a pretty broad scale. So it's anything from gardening to taking your dog for a walk, to cooking a meal from scratch, or drawing, or making a ceramic pot. There's all sorts of definitions that we apply to creativity, and it's just educating yourself about the fact that it can be helpful to shift your nervous system into a different state, and being conscious about kind of putting it into your day as a tool to help yourself. You want to talk about the 5 elements?
Yeah, so we kind of, there's doing something creative, and some people do that for work or for all sorts of reasons, but for it to be an act of first aid or kind of a tool for well-being, to be good for you, we kind of name 5 elements that need to be almost held lightly. We don't want to kind of hold on too tightly to them, but that there's an element of safekeeping, that there's a lot of people are quite confronted by their own creativity, or have a lot of shame or past experiences of feeling not good enough or humiliated around that. So we need to kind of repair that experience through trying to create the conditions to practice creativity and feel safe doing that. Like, you're not going to be judged. No one's going to come along and say, well, that's terrible. There's self-compassion in there, inch by inch thinking, which is just trying to move away from black and white thinking, like I'm creative or I'm not, or I'm well or I'm not, I'm healthy or I'm not. And these are things we can step towards or away, all those things. Curiosity is such a big focus. Curiosity is the gateway to play and to creativity and to feeling free to express ourselves. And then the 5th element is playfulness, which is that space where we really give our whole body and soul a giant recharge and rest. And, I guess part of what we define as creativity too is the act of caring for ourselves is a creative act. We have to imagine things that aren't there yet. We have to make connections about what we need and then giving that to ourselves. So that in itself is an act of creativity. And we also in the book talk about 6 outcomes that happen when we practice creativity in this way that are good for us. So there is the nervous system stuff. There's also just, giving ourselves perspective beyond our inner world, like connecting with the awe and wonder of this amazing planet. We know and have witnessed this through our work that when people connect with something that they enjoy, they want to share it with other people. So it just builds community care and, social connection, which is a big part of well-being as well. And helps to fine-tune people trusting their gut and inner wisdom, which for lots of people, particularly in trauma experiences, that's all a bit chaotic, learning to trust that wisdom can be confusing. So yeah, the book, it lays out a bit of a roadmap for how to start this. And in terms of how do people start, it's using those elements, like, let me try something. I'm not sure how it's going to go. I'll just try it for 5 minutes and see how it feels. It's taking away focus on the outcome and instead just feeling the process of pushing paint around a page or, playing an instrument or something. And so there's 50 prescriptions in the book. Some of them are just for a minute. Most of them don't require materials or many materials, mostly things you'd probably have around the house. So, we're trying to kind of just help people open that door as easily and accessibly as possible.
And I think for allied health workers and therapists to use creative first aid in their work is really just as easy as just taking it seriously, that creativity is a dose of medicine. And we work with a lot of GPs down here who prescribe it on a script pad. So it's kind of doctor's orders. And when it comes as doctor's orders, people tend to do it. If a doctor tells you to go into the forest once a week and touch a tree, that they do it, and then you start seeing the results. So I guess the first step is to prescribe it, and then, you know, the book has a whole bunch of prescriptions in it that you can use.
Yeah.
Caitlin and Lizzie, thank you so much for bringing a heightened awareness to this incredible resource that we have available to ourselves all the time for our health and wellbeing. It's exciting to have it at the Health Lodge and to be able to let people know about that resource. And I've just noticed in my own practice just how quickly and more thoroughly I'm thinking about those times and places to prescribe. Just yesterday I did an EMDR session, and I just got an email back today from that person, and he said, look, I've just realised I really need to rest much more. There are forces that are trying to push me back to work, but I realised from that session I just need to rest. And now there's going to be a very exciting conversation about what he does creatively with that time. So that wouldn't have been something I would have realised or thought about as accurately before. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having us. And we're excited to share our resource.
Absolutely. Time to wind up. Is there a last thing on your mind, or something you want to leave us with?
Well, I guess we'll leave it with what it says at the very back of the book on the blurb, which was a study done by Dr. Christina Davis, which has found that you don't have to be good at art for art to be good for you. So that's a byline that we use, which is pretty accurate summary of what creative first aid's about.
Yeah, and just all the evidence, and we've known this actually as humans for thousands of years, is we're designed to be creative and express ourselves creatively. It's